What's going on, everybody? This Afro Think Tank. Have you guys ever heard of white trauma? Yeah, apparently it's PTSD white people suffer from the effects of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery, Jim Crow, and redlining. Apparently, right, just like black people in America suffer from PTSD from those very same events, white people also suffer their own form of trauma because of those events. And it makes sense. You got to figure that white people being lied to systematically within their own communities, being forced to believe certain things via Christianity being used as the medium to force white people to capitulate to white supremacist culture. Because they use Christianity, right, and the guilt of Christianity and where they can drum up in the church as an organization to control the masses within their communities, and then the fathers inside the family who are beholden to the church reinforce white supremacist ideologies within the family, destroying the white family internally, trying to maintain the facade of white supremacy, while in reality they're suffering from white supremacy the same way black folks suffer from white supremacy. Well, not the same way, but their own level of disenfranchisement that they haven't figured out that they are the architects of their own destruction, right? But they're suffering from the trauma, self inflicted trauma, by the way, self-inflicted trauma. So they can't blame anybody else, but they're trying to find a way to cope with the guilt that they actually feel on the inside, the guilt of having certain levels of privilege, just all around being held accountable. Nobody wants to be held accountable for what you and your people do. Nobody wants like the feeling of being told your people are doing something bad and they need to correct it. Nobody likes that, right? So white people are kind of like dealing with that right now, right? And all their traumas are coming out. So let's go ahead and see what they got to say, and let's learn a little bit about this white trauma. Anyway, tell me what you think in the comment section. The Afro Think Tank, learn something, teach something. I'm out.
So do you know why it's called white trauma? Because we're white people? Like, black trauma is the trauma of the black people? Not exactly. It's called white trauma as a shortened version of the term white on white trauma. Like white on white crime? Kinda. Except this specifically refers to the generational trauma left by white supremacy on other white people. How would white people have trauma from something they did? Good question. For labeling and discussion purposes, we're going to label these the pure whites and these the spicy whites. And this is who belonged where. That's like half of white people. Weren't we always white? Oh, beloved, a lot of today's white people were not considered white until like the 60s or 70s. Over on Facebook, I've met a lot of people who remember when they weren't considered white. Wow. I mean, that is interesting, but how does that lead to generational trauma? Well, in combination with my last two videos, if you haven't seen those, go watch them. The pure whites had a Supreme Court-supported hierarchy on whiteness. That exclusion forced spicy whites at the time to get in line with whiteness, or the much worse latter at the time, be considered ethnic and other. But like you said in your last few videos, a lot of them did still do stuff wrong, like participating in racism and segregation. 100% true. And yet another complexity is making the spicy whites feel like they signed up for it. Pure whites baited newcomers to the new world, isolated them from their ancestry, and triggered a survival mode need for community. And the only community for the whites was racist. Damn, all that and we still don't have a sense of community. Bingo. The difference is black people can identify how the community was affected by the generational traumas that were put onto us. But what about you? How many of you feel abandoned for not truly belonging to anything? Why are the sewer slide and crime rates so high for white Americans? Why do so many white Americans fall into cults? I've never even thought about it. I just thought it was because there were so many of us. So just to recap white trauma, these guys, white people, committed a bunch of racial atrocities, created an exclusivity on whiteness, figured out they'd have more numbers by being less exclusive, but maintained whiteness with racism. With being less exclusive on who was considered white, they blurred the lines on who was responsible for what atrocities. Whoa. So that means white people created white guilt. Boom.
My fellow white American childhood trauma survivors, I promise you, you are never going to be able to unpack everything that happened to you and the shame around it if we don't have a conversation about anti-racism and white supremacy. Professionally, personally, sociologically, intellectually, I could point out to you the ways in which your childhood trauma is a direct result of how white supremacy and white supremacist culture penetrated your households and affected the ways in which your parents perpetually dehumanized you for their own ego, for their own benefit. And I can guarantee you that almost every single thing your parents ever did wrong to you that caused harm to you in such a significant way is a direct result of one of the 15 primary characteristics of white supremacy, one of the tenets of white supremacy. I too once believed that my childhood trauma had absolutely nothing to do with white supremacy or racism or anything of that nature, but I promise you, when you are raised in a country whose foundations, whose ethical foundations are rooted in the dehumanization of people, that culture penetrates your household. You have to understand the type of mental illness and cognitive dissonance to exist within our white grandparents for them to walk about the world thinking that they are good people or convincing themselves that they are good people while mutually dehumanizing and demoralizing Black, Indigenous people of color. That delusion and mental sickness affects the ways in which they raised our parents, which affects the ways our parents raised us. That is a culture that lives on within us. That is a mindset and sickness that lives on within us in the ways that we dehumanize and we demoralize not only other people that don't look like us, but ourselves and each other. If you are actually serious as a white person about breaking down and understanding your childhood trauma, you need to implement and understand anti-racism.
I mean, you're really hard on yourself. I have to be if I want to be a good person. First and foremost, I'm a white American. Second of all, I am a white woman. And third of all, the amount of trauma I've experienced has made me cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. If I want to walk in this world with kindness, compassion, and empathy, I actually have to work against all of the things I've been socialized to do since I came into this world. I have to be very mindful about how I perceive things, how I speak to people. My mother taught me from a very young age that not only were my feelings everybody else's problem, but that other people were responsible for fixing them. And if I don't stay on top of that and effectively take care of myself, unfortunately, I become a nightmare. It doesn't mean I have malice in my heart, but if I refuse to address my behavior for what it is, then unfortunately I become no different than the people who hurt me, because the common denominator of all of those people is that they refuse to look at themselves in the mirror.
Hello, it's me again. So I just wanted to also share something, a story and experience about something I've gone through on each side of the family. Again, I am Mexican, Native, and white. So on my white side, there was this one time I went over to my grandmother's house with my daughter, who is like 75% Mexican. Her dad is first generation American. His parents are from Mexico. So anyways, and knowing my white side, I'm the only child on that side that is mixed. So we went over to her house. I drove like an hour and a half to get there in the Dalles in Oregon. And there was an instance where her and her husband were just talking about how they think it's stupid that they're removing the native, the Indian profile of the image on the Indians. I don't know what sports team or what type of sport it is again, but you know, there's that team there that has that name and image. And then they go on talking about other things that is just completely ridiculous. It's always about politics and stuff, you know, but extremely racist, extremely inappropriate, and no one was saying anything. Because why would, I don't know, you know, it's a bunch of bullshit. So anyways, I say something because number one, my daughter's in the house. I am of culture, and you're fucking specifically talking about my culture here and saying how it's stupid. And when I said something, I said, you know, it makes sense because we're trying to, as a generation now, not normalize that kind of bullshit. It's not okay, right? And I got put down for it. I'm irrational or, you know, just too emotional about something. And I've also been told too that you're not even that much to even be that offended by it. I'm not really sure what that means. I mean, how much does someone have to be of culture? You know, I could be 1/16th. That's not even the case. Like, I grew up around powwows. I grew up around my cousins competing. I made moccasins with my aunties around the table when I was pregnant with both my children. You know, I have actively practiced in my culture. So for me to say anything, it makes sense because I want to show my daughter that it's okay to always stand up for yourself no matter what, to who, and to be proud of who you are. So in that moment, I had to leave. Like, I'd only been there for, I think, an hour, and I was really upset because my aunt had traveled all the way from northern Washington. It's like a 3-hour drive. And I stood there and I was like, you know, I'm not gonna fucking stand this anymore. I can't take it. You're a racist, and I'm not gonna sit here and let you talk about this in front of my fucking 5-year-old daughter. I haven't talked to that grandmother in a year now, almost.
People are surprised to find out all of the crazy non-hygienic things that white people do. And I've been holding on to this for a while, but I just have to share. I grew up in a household where I would be bullied and laughed at if I took longer than 5-minute showers. My dad also constantly had dookie in his underwear. So bad, too, by the time I was 10, I went to my mom and said, I don't want to do anyone else's laundry. So she said, okay, you can do your own laundry then. My parents also didn't teach me how to bathe myself. I learned how to bathe myself from my friends. Like, as a little kid, I don't know if this was normal, but I would have sleepovers with my friends and we would bathe together. And that is literally how I learned how to bathe properly. Not from my parents, but from other friends. I also was not taught how to use sanitary products when I started my period, and my mom just told me to figure it out myself. And again, it was through my friends that I figured out how to properly use pads and tampons. I was using tampons wrong for like a year because my mom just would make fun of me if I needed help with anything. Or she'd be like, oh, you're having issues? I actually have worse issues than you. Anytime I had health issues and my mom wasn't around, my dad would just take me to the ER, which resulted in really dumb visits. Like, one time I got diagnosed with scabies at the ER. It turns out I actually just had a rash, a chlorine rash on my neck from a hot tub I had been in because I'm allergic to chlorine. But like, man can't clean his butt and also just like panics anytime I would have a little cough or a little rash. Don't know why I got diagnosed with scabies when I didn't have it, but white people are gross. I guess it wouldn't have been surprising if I had it. I did not even know how often you were supposed to change your sheets and your pillows, or how you're supposed to wash jackets, because I was taught, like, well, it's an outer layer, so you don't need to wash it. Not to mention how my parents literally wouldn't even buy me underwear. So at 16 years old, I remember I was still wearing underwear that I got when I was 10. That's like a whole other version of abuse, but I think that cleanliness goes along with that. Why are you not paying attention? Well, actually, my mom knew, she just didn't care. Why don't you care that your kid doesn't have underwear that fits them, that doesn't have holes in them, that doesn't embarrass them in the locker room? I think I'll end this here, but yeah, that's just a little story time of how I grew up and how fucking nasty white people are. And yeah, fucking gross.
There are so many people of color that are adopted into white families that have trauma. There's one topic that I think some of us transracial adoptees should talk about, and that's the internalized racism we have against our own races. For instance, I grew up in a white family, and in my late teens I noticed something. I felt uncomfortable around other black people, and that was so damaging. Some of the black people I encountered growing up often came from very different life circumstances than my own, and because my exposure was slightly limited, I started making unfair assumptions without even realizing it. I found myself having negative feelings towards black people in general. This opened up a whole new area of discussion between me and my family. We had friends who were black. They tended to either be African or other African Americans who had achieved success. We even had a Congolese refugee living with us at the time. However, for some reason, I tended to discount him and our friends as the norm. I fell into a trap that many fall into regardless of race, that of generalizing and judging based on the negatives or stereotypes that may be placed before us by media depictions, and then reinforced when witnessed in daily life somehow or another. I would absolutely consider that to be a form of trauma, and I'm so glad I was able to eventually realize that and move away from that type of thinking. I think what it was is that I was viewing some Black people through a lens that wasn't shaped by very authentic relationships. It was shaped by limited exposure, media, and a world where whiteness was mostly my norm. That is so messed up, and at times I definitely cried about it. It was a lot to unpack. If you are a BIPOC adoptee or a transracial adoptee, have you ever felt this way? I'm genuinely so curious to know what experiences you have been through.
This discourse talking about how white people don't know how to wash themselves is really fascinating to me, and so I want to share my experience about how I actually learned how to wash and what it looked like in my white supremacist Mormon household growing up. Now, I always had washcloths available to me. They were always under the sink. It wasn't really enforced or taught. It was always in the bathtub. And it seemed like there was just kind of like one in there, and then we'd change it every week. I was never touching it. I don't know if my siblings were touching it. I know when we were younger, we'd play with it in the tub, but when it comes to washing, the grossest thing that still grosses me out to this day thinking about it is how we would share bathwater. I had 4 siblings. We'd all share bathwater. When we were younger, it was either like 2 and 2 would go, or like after we'd each go in the last person's bathwater. The grossest thing was my older sister. We're 22 months apart. She sometimes would shower with my younger sister, and when she was like 9 or 10 years old, our youngest sister came to us and told us that, hey, there's yellow stuff in the bathwater. And my older sister tooted. And we're like, what? We ended up getting out of my older sister that she was peeing in the bathwater. Now, mind you, me and her are 22 months apart. We shared bathwater my entire childhood. I always thought we were clean until 2005 when I moved to Atlanta. White people don't talk about cleanliness. White people don't talk about cleaning themselves. White people don't talk about lotion. White people don't talk about their hair nearly to the scale that the Black community does. I went there and I was dumbfounded by how much they held each other accountable to their appearances. Nails, hair, everything pristine all the time. And my mom, I felt like, was very much like that growing up, but it felt like this was like up like 10 notches. So that's kind of where I learned most of the things you should be doing, like moisturizing after you shower. I learned that in Atlanta.
You know, I don't know any white adults who now go to therapy because they were traumatized as a kid because they were told that white people owned slaves. But I do know a lot of adults who are in therapy, keeping a lot of therapists in business because they experienced a lot of religious trauma as a child. I think it's a lot less traumatic learning about horrendous things that happen in history so we don't repeat them than it is to not learn about horrendous things that happen in history and wind up repeating them. Being told that people with your same skin color did awful things to people with different skin colors isn't going to make a kid feel nearly as guilty as telling them that they were born a sinner because of a woman who ate an apple a couple thousand years ago. Telling kids that God is always watching them and that not obeying them will mean that they burn for an eternity in hell is really fucking traumatizing. Telling girls that their bodies are going to cause men to stumble and fall, and that their most precious gift to give to their husbands is their purity, is extremely traumatizing and devaluing.
White people love to play the victim in basically any situation, and I say this as a white person. It is a pattern that I have witnessed time and time again, especially when white people are called out for their terrible behavior. That is why they continue to gaslight Black and brown people when they talk about their experiences with racism, because they don't want to admit that they've done anything wrong. And white victimhood is a classic tenet of white supremacy, and more specifically, it is a classic behavior that white women will take part in. Like white woman tears because the actual thought of taking responsibility for any of their actions is repulsive to them. And that's why if you want to fully deconstruct and to be a better ally, you have to get over yourself. You have to get over the fact that you've been taught to play the victim your entire life. Because the reality is that in a system that you are quite literally benefiting from, you cannot possibly be the victim in these situations. The people who are truly being victimized by the system are black and brown people who are being paid less, who are being mistreated, who are being victims of hate crimes. So today, think about how you can get over yourself and stop being a victim in order to better support the people around you, which starts with actually listening to their experiences instead of trying to interject your own intentions or your own experiences. Because at the end of the day, it's not about you.
Who here has childhood trauma? Growing up, I did not like being Asian. And I think a lot of it had to do with growing up in a predominantly white area, as well as having parents assimilating to whiteness. As a kid, I would collect Naruto manga, was really into anime, and was in touch with my heritage. As I got into high school, I always thought that the things that I used to like as a kid was always so weird and so otherly. So much so that I became a cheerleader in high school, which was seen as the pinnacle of whiteness and popularity, which worked. It wasn't until I got into college that I realized that as a queer person of color, I was doing all these things because I wanted to stand out and have a voice, and so I felt like I had to overcompensate myself. As an adult, I'm starting to accept myself again and healing that inner child. I just shipped all 50 volumes of my Naruto manga I had as a kid to my house here as an adult. And I think that's the best thing that we can do for ourselves, is letting adult you heal child you. Which is why I'm gonna go manga shopping and finish collecting all the other volumes.
My brain is so entirely fucked up from watching a genocide happen for what, over 120 days now? And like, this morning, I'm so thrilled to see Mansoor posted. Like, I'm so thrilled that he's safe, he's alive, like, couldn't be happier. But then immediately after, I see this video of like a woman, I'm just so broken, she's never gonna be the fucking same. Like, she said that she was playing with her son when her home was targeted. And like, her son's head, like, blew up, like, off his body, and she was just screaming how he had no body, or it's only his body and he had no head. And then the next video, this man's like giving it, like showing us around what used to be his home, I assume, and like shows parts of his child's brain and ear. Like, these children are literally being blown to fucking pieces, and we're worried about like the fucking Grammys. Fuck the fucking Grammys. Fuck that. Like, I don't give a fuck about any.
Every accusation is a confession. I will not elaborate.
Yep, time to go. That motherfucker coming over here. Ooh, shit. Hey, Carlo, bitch, look behind you. Ooh, shit, motherfucker.
Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan!
Thanks for watching Afro Think Tank. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And follow me on Substack and Patreon for more content. Remember, it's Pan-Africanism or nothing.